안녕하세요. 네, 수업을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. Before we start, a couple of announcements. Oops, 이렇게 됐냐? On our syllabus, 우리 syllabus에 보면은 on our orientation, I said that we are going to take our not midterm finals on 6월 14일이라고 얘기를 했어요. 근데 I think because of the classroom situation, 아마 있잖아요. 아마 3상형 과목이 아마 6월 14일 날 여기 써야 될 거예요. 그래서 classroom situation 때문에 I think we might have to experience some kind of changes to the date. So I have requested the school for the finals to be changed to 6월 16일 날, 목요일 날로 변화하도록 요청을 해놨으니까 아직 컨펌은 받지 못했어요. I have not received the confirmation yet. However, I anticipate our final exam to be on June 16th. 6월 16일 날 치를 예정이에요. If I receive a final confirmation, I will let you know. Okay? 근데 지금 6월 16일로 지금 변경할 예정입니다. So I'm sorry I can't keep your promise. I keep my promise. 근데 아마 기말이니까 강의실 사정 때문에 좀 미룰 수밖에 없을 것 같아요. So 양해 좀 부탁드리겠습니다. So originally we have planned our finals to be on the June 16th, the Tuesday. However, because of a classroom situation, I need to change this to June 16th. I need a final confirmation from this school that my current plan is to change it to June 16th. It may change. If there's any changes to it, I will let you know. Okay? Now, 목요일에 우리 수업이 좀 많이 늦게 끝나죠? 근데 에스파가 오시죠? 예, 그래서 제가 에스파를 이길 수는 없겠죠? So I can't win them, right? So I'm not gonna 휴강은 하지는 않을 거고 I'm gonna upload a recording on YouTube. 유튜브에 리코딩은 녹화본을 올릴 거예요. 여러분들 즐겁게 지내다가 오세요. 오케이? 그래서 주말에 보시고 그 대신에 화요일부터 다시 또 수업을 재개합시다. 오케이? 싫으십니까? 수업을 오시겠습니까? 오시고 싶으시다면 오시는 분들도 있죠. 그 하는 수업들. 오케이. 근데 우리 수업은 너무 늦게 끝나잖아요. 그렇죠? 그래서 제가 가슴이 뛰어서 뭐 소리가 여기까지는 들리진 않지만 들리면 너무 뛰어서 제가 할 수가 없을 것 같아요. 저도. Okay, so on Thursday class, there will be an online class. So it's no class는 아니고 change in medium, 휴강은 아니고 online class. So I will upload a lecture on YouTube. So you must watch it. 반드시 보셔야 되고 보신 내용에 대해서 제가 숙제를 중간중간에 언급을 할 테니 숙제를 중간중간에 보신 분들은 할 수 있는 그런 숙제를 내도록 하겠습니다. Okay? 네. Any questions? Okay. 그럼 다음 화요일은 여기서 수업이에요. So next Tuesday it's going to be an in-class lecture. Now, chapter 15. So chapter 15 is about equity. So we're going to talk about equity from now. So equity is a section underneath the statements of financial position, right? We have many encounter looking at the statements of financial position, income statement, and now we're kind of used to looking at the statements of cash flow. But truthfully, we don't have enough understanding in the equity section. Equity section terminology is more complicated and wording terminology is more complicated. Structure is a little different. And from company to company, it's all different. So it's a little hard for anybody with no knowledge and no pre-knowledge to read the information at the equity section. Also, we should have done it at the statements, at the principles of accounting class, but because of time issues, in general, we really can't cover everything on equity. So we tend to miss out on equity section, but it's really important section. It talks about the company's or shareholders' wealth. So I think it's better use of our time to look at the equity section. Okay? 그래서 equity를 보도록 하겠습니다. We've talked about the equity. We've talked about first, we started out by talking the equation asset equals liability plus equity, right? Okay, so what was this? What was the relationship? Asset equals liability plus equity. What does this mean? From the money from the creditor and the money capital from the equity holders, we owe the creditor, company, and the investor with their money. Company invested in their own company, right? So whatever we own is from the creditor and the equity holders money. 그렇죠? 김밥 천국할 때 얘기했죠. 엄마 돈과 우리 흥민님의 돈을 받아서 우리가 얘기했죠. 보셨어요, 여러분? 안 보셨으면은 대화를 할 수가 없습니다. Anyways, from the creditors' money and the investors' money, we have purchased tables, we have purchased chairs, we have purchased schemes. So we've run our business, operated our business, right? So we've looked at this equation. 이거 얘기하면서 while we were looking at it, we expanded this equation a little bit. So we've expanded this asset equals liability plus equity. We expanded this and said liability plus share capital plus retained earnings, right? The reason we separated the equity into share capital versus retained earning is that we can split the equity into two sections. 이걸 두 개의 다른 성격으로 나눌 수 있기 때문이에요. These are two different classes of equity. 성격이 완전 달라요. 결이 달라요. They are different in characteristics. So we have to approach this separately. We call this section what? We call this, 이거 배웠죠? We call this a contributed capital or equity. And we call this section earned equity. We've talked about 이거 얘기했었죠? 네. Contributed equity is what? Transaction between the company and the shareholder. Any transaction related to the company, between the company and the shareholder, 주주와 회사 간의 거래에 관한 정보는 여기에 다 적히고, information in terms of the trade between the equity holder and the company is going to be recorded at the contributed equity section. Any organic growth of the company, 회사가 성장하는 부분에 대해서는 여기에서 이야기를 할 거예요. When Mr. Yahtzee invested in Yahtzee advertising, 어떻게 journalization 했어요? How do we make a journalization? Yahtzee invested cash of 1 million, 100만 원을 넣어서, so what do? We recorded share capital ordinary of 1 million, right? 이거였잖아요. So when Mr. Yahtzee invested in the company, he did a transaction between the company Yahtzee, Mr. Yahtzee와 회사 간의 거래였잖아요. He gave us cash, so we gave him a certificate called share. 그렇죠? 주식이라는 증서를 영수증 형태로 준 거잖아요. We gave him a certificate, verifying that he has invested in the company, right? So that was that. 회사가 또 성장할 수 있는 방법은 하나가 earnings가 있죠. Another way a company can grow is through its earnings. 회사가 사업을 잘 영위해서 영업을 잘해서 회사가 성장해서 돈을 벌면은 회사의 가치가 가치가 상승하는 거죠. 이게 이 섹션이에요. So this is from the operation of the company. This is from shareholders' contribution. So it's 두 개가 결이 달라요. So equity can grow in two ways. One is if investors invest money in the company, or company grow from their business. Okay, 결이 다르기 때문에 두 개를 나눠본다고 그랬어요. Contributed equity, contributed capital이라고도 부르고, and the earned equity or earned capital. Okay, so that's that. Now, 여태까지는 when we've had a investment coming in from an investor, we use an account called share capital ordinary. 그렇죠? 사실은 the account name should be share capital. 이거 하나예요. But because there are two classes of shareholders, we've talked about this, right? There are two classes of shareholders. One is a common share or ordinary shareholder, and the other is a preferred shareholder. So we want to classify this separately. So we put ordinary OT에 붙였어요. 김재영 A, 김재영 B 같은 거예요. 김지영 A 다른 사람, 김지영 B 다른 사람이잖아요. 그 share capital ordinary. We wanted to indicate that this is related to the ordinary shareholder. Share capital prefer. This is related to the preferred shareholder. Okay, so before we talk about that, let me talk about the two classes of shareholders. 다시 한번 얘기할게요. So there are two classes of shareholder. One is a ordinary shareholder. 미국 말로는 common stock. And there is preferred shareholder. There are two classes. 하나는 보통주 주주, 하나는 우선주 주주. Underneath the IFRS, we use the term ordinary shareholder. Underneath the GAAP, they call it common shareholder, common stockholder. 똑같은 얘기예요. Preferred shareholder, 우선주 주주. So what is the biggest difference between the common shareholder and the ordinary shareholder? 외면하지 마세요. What is the biggest difference between the ordinary shareholder and the preferred shareholder? 모른 척을 모르겠어요. Okay. Mr. Guillaume. Voting right. 의결권이 있느냐 없느냐가 가장 커요. So whether you have a voting right or not is the biggest difference. Okay? 그러면 여러분들이 물을 수 있는 질문이 뭐가 있겠어요? What would be the question that you might ask? Okay, I understand. Shareholders, shareholder 역할이 뭐예요? Why do people want to become a shareholder? Because they could share the corporate earnings. 회사의 어떤 주주로서 회사의 이익을 나눌 수 있기 때문이죠. Because they are a owner of the company, so they could share the company's wealth. You want to be a 주주가 되고 싶은 거잖아요. 일반적으로. 그러면 여러분들이 물어볼 수 있는 질문이 뭐겠어요? Oh, sorry. So because you want to be a part of the company, you want to own the company, and you want to be able to share the company's wealth. So that's probably the basic reason, one of the biggest reason that you want to become a shareholder. 그렇죠? But then, yes, I want to become a shareholder. Yes, I want to make a difference of the company, so I want to raise my voice. But why do I want to become a preferred shareholder? Why would company want to issue a preferred share? As a shareholder, why would I want to become a preferred shareholder? 회사는 왜 우선주 주주를 원할 거고 또 우선주 투자자들은 왜 우선주 투자자가 될까요? 여기가 있는데 왜 굳이 다른 클래스를 둘까요? 한결이. 배당의 차이가 as a shareholder you want higher dividend? 그것까지는 잘 모르겠고 재영이 why? 회사에서는 왜 from a company 또 다르게 생각해 봅시다. From a company standpoint, why would they want to have a different class of shareholders? 다 편하니까. Yes. Because company would like to have a shareholder that does not have voting right. Why? Voting right은 뭐예요? 의결권이잖아요. So voting right means they are able to raise their voices. 잔소리가 많아지잖아요. 잔소리꾼이 없으면 돈만 주는 사람이 있으면 얼마나 좋겠어요. 그렇죠? If nobody can raise their voices but invest in a company, how good is that? Wonderful. 그렇죠? So companies, they want investors, but they don't want to give them 의결권. 그러면은 또 질문 재영이한테. 그러면 왜 투자자를 why do they want shareholders? Can't they just raise can't they just get money from the credit holders? 왜 사채를 발행하거나 해서 크레디터를 통해 가지고 돈을 받을 수도 있는데 왜 굳이 쉐어홀더를 원할까요? 유한해서 회사 입장에서는 From the company standpoint. 네. Instead of issuing debt, why would they want to issue a preferred share? 이자를 안 내니까. Yes. Because debt holder, if you borrow money from debt holder creditors, you have to pay them interest. Or you have to repay them after a certain period. 어느 기간이 지나면 돈을 다시 되돌려줘야 돼요. That's a burden to the company. Giving them a cash later on and paying like on a regular basis interest. It's not a small amount. So that's a burden to the company. So if they can receive money from a shareholder and the company does not have to give them ownership or voting right, isn't that perfect? 완벽하죠? 그렇죠? 그래서 그런 걸 찾았어요. 근데 또 이런 걸 원하는 사람이 있네. So people want to become this class of shareholders. Why? 아까 한결이가 얘기했던 것처럼 because they want higher dividend. Why? Because if I'm a shareholder of Samsung Electronics, 내가 삼성전자의 주주라고 해봅시다. Is my voice gonna be heard to 이재영? 아니, 난 주주예요. 저는 10년, 20년, 30년 된 주주지만 한 주밖에 안 갖고 있다고 해봅시다. 오래된 주주지만 난 사람들한테 얘기해. 나 주인이야. 그렇지만은 이재영이 저를 알아요? No, he's not gonna know me. My voice is not gonna be heard anyway. 어차피 내 의결권에 영향을 미치지 않아요. 그러면 대신에 나는 뭐라도 하겠어? As a investor, 그러면 배당이라도 많이 받자. Higher dividend. I will give up my voting right. So instead, give me something more. 내가 의결권을 포기할 테니 뭐 더 줘. 그래야 내가 이거 되지. 뭘 더 줄까? 회사에서 물어봤더니 배당을 더 줘. So the needs for both party meets. 그래서 preferred share가 있는 겁니다. Okay? So preferred shareholders, they don't have the voting right. But because they are giving up their voting right at the expense of their voting right, they get higher dividend. 그러면은 why do you think they are called preferred shareholders? 왜 우선주라고 이야기가 될까요? 주한이, why do you think they're called preferred shareholders? 배당을 나눠줘요? 배당을 나눠준다는 게 무슨 의미일까요? 배당을 줘서 그러면 보통 주주는 배당을 받아야 안 받아요? 그럼 얘들도 우선주라고 불려요? 먼저 부여를 해요. 왜 먼저 부여를 할까요? 의결권을 포기했기 때문에 예. 예. 거의 맞아요. 거의 맞아요. So, preferred shareholders, they have the right to receive dividend at a higher dividend, but they said we want to receive dividend prior to the ordinary shareholders. 그래서 우선권이 있는 거예요. 근데 정확하게 말하자면 거기서 우선권이 아니고, so 여기서 우선권은 여기서 말하는 거예요. 나중에 if a company goes through a liquidation, 청산을 할 때를 얘기를 하는 거예요. If a company goes through liquidation, liquidation이 뭐예요? 회사가 청산 절차를 밟을 때를 얘기를 해요. 청산이 뭘까요? 김밥 천국이 문을 닫는 거예요. So 김밥 heaven is closing down. So then if 김밥 천국 is closing down, what do I have to do? 문을 닫으면 뭐 하겠어요? 보통 I sell my table. 그쵸? I sell my chair. 돈 되는 건 다 팔아야 되죠. I sell my refrigerator. 다 팔아요. So after selling everything, I make everything into 현금화하죠. 유동성이죠. 우리가 말하는 유동성은 현금화해요. 그런 다음에 이거를 이제 돈으로 바꿨으니까 나눠줘야 되는 거죠. I have to divide this among people that I owe. 내가 갚아야 되는 사람한테 돈을 갚아야 되는 거잖아요. Company owes the creditors and the shareholder. So the company has to pay out whatever they owe. 그런데 모두들 everybody wants something. 김밥 천국이 문을 닫은 게 갑자기 등을 돌려. 엄마도 돈 내놔라, 아빠도 돈 내놔라, 흥민이도 돈 내놔라, 은행도 돈 내놔라. Everybody wants their share. 저한테 막 달려들어요. 그럼 내가 줄을 서시오 하겠죠. Wait in line, go in line. 누가 뒤로 가고 싶었겠어요? Everybody wants to come. 죄송해요. Everybody wants to come at the front of the line. So everybody would like to come into the front of the line, right? So by law, 그러면 안 되잖아요. 막 아수라장이 되는 거잖아요. So by law, we have specified the order of all the share payout at the liquidating stage. Okay, 누가 제일 먼저 받냐? It's the employees. 임금을 먼저 페이아웃하고, then it's the creditors. And then you pay out to the preferred shareholders. And then you pay out to the ordinary shareholders. 이때 돈을 나누는 것도 배당이라고 얘기를 하는 거예요. 청산 배당이라고 얘기를 해요. Okay, so it's the creditors first, and then the preferred shareholders, and then the ordinary shareholders are paid out first. Okay, 그래서 so in some case preferred share is very similar to bond, right? 부채와 굉장히 유사하죠. 그래서 어떤 사람들은 some people classify these as bonds. 주식으로 분류하는 부채로 분류하는 사람도 있어요. 그렇지만 그 형식적으로 생각할 때 when you're thinking, however, by our accounting law, this is purely shareholder, right? Okay, so preferred share is like a hybrid 같은 거예요. 가운데 있는 거예요. So preferred share has both the features of debt and equity. 두 개 다 있는 겁니다. Okay. So 거기까지 얘기를 했어요. Okay. Okay, so let's now talk about the shareholder. So before we move on, components of equity. So contributed capital, earned capital. 이 과에서는 contributed capital에 focus해서 이야기를 할 거예요. So in this chapter, we're going to focus mostly on the contributed equity, contributed capital. Retained earned capital, retained earning, we've talked about it in income statements, right? So we're not going to focus too much on that section, but mostly the contributed capital and this part. Okay, so the biggest classification in the equity is contributed capital. We have ordinary shares and preferred shares, and we also have something called share premium. So 지금까지 we've used share capital, which shows how much investors invested in the company, right? We had two different classes, share capital, ordinary. We're also going to have, if preferred shareholders invested in our company, we're going to use an account share capital preferred. Okay. 우선주 주주가 회사에 투자했다면 share capital preferred로 분류할 거예요. We're also going to use a special account called share premium. If it's related to the ordinary shareholders, we're going to call it a share premium ordinary. Also, we're going to use share premium common or preferred. Okay, so 어떤 건지 알겠죠? There are two accounts that we're going to use in discussing the contributed capital. That's share capital and share premium. 이제 주식의 주주의 클래스에 따라서 등급에 따라서 is it an ordinary share, preferred share, ordinary share, preferred share 나눠서 얘기할 거예요. Okay? Treasury share, we're going to talk about it later. Generally, treasury share minuses the equity. treasury 자사주는 equity를 감소시키는 효과를 가지고 와요. 그럼 나중에 다시 이야기를 해드릴게요. I'll talk about that later. Okay, now on a statements of financial position, you have mostly seen this type of format. Underneath the equity, we have share capital ordinary section and retained earnings section. Now, ownership rights of shareholders. Shareholders have the right to what? Vote in election of board of directors on actions that require shareholders approval. So because shareholders are owners of the company, they have voting right. So when did they use their voting right? To vote in election of board of directors, 이사회를 뽑는다든지 아니면은 important company's decision that requires shareholders approval. Okay, something like paying out dividend 이런 것들에 대해서는 주주가 의결권을 냅니다. Also, shareholders have the right to share the corporate earnings through receipt of dividends. Okay, if company generates a lot of earnings, 돈을 많이 벌면 엄마가 나한테 얘기하죠. 야, 내가 샤넬 가방을 포기하고 너한테 투자를 했는데 왜 아무것도 없어? 배당을 주죠. So when when we talked about the kimbap 천국 example, she said, I've given up my, my dream of owning a Chanel bag, and I don't get nothing. So give me something. So I distribute the company's wealth, right? We call that dividend. 회사의 이익을 나누는 거를 다 배당이라고 얘기를 해요. Okay, so share of corporate dividend. Now 3, company or shareholders have right to keep the same percentage ownership when new shares are issued. We call this preemptive right. 신인수권이라고 얘기를 합니다. So let's talk about preemptive right. So preemptive right when company issues new shares, 신주를 발행할 때 나오는 거예요. Existing shareholders can have the right to maintain the existing ownership percentage. 지분율을 그대로 유지할 수 있는 권리가 발생을 하게 돼요. 무슨 이야기냐? Okay, let's say there are 2 owners in company. Okay, A and B. Let's say we've issued 100 shares originally. 원래 100주를 발행을 했다고 합시다. Let's say A holds 50 shares and B holds 50 shares. What is their ownership interest? 지분율이 어떻게 돼요? 50%. 50%가 되겠죠? Okay. Let's now say companies, they need more money. 회사가 돈이 필요해서 자본을 증가시켜야 돼요. Okay. 자본을 증가시켜야 돼요. So they issue 200 more shares. 200주를 추가로 발행을 해요. If company needs more capital injection, they need to issue shares, right? 자본금이 더 유입이 되려면 주식을 발행을 해야 되는 거잖아요. So now, preemptive right means, okay, A, B, they already had 50 shares, right? 새로 100을 가지고 있을 수 있는 right, 권리입니다. So when 200 new shares are issuing, 50% of that should be given to A, 50% of that should be given to B. 이게 preemptive right. They have the right. 권리예요, 권리. 그러면은 what does it mean? They buy shares. That means these shareholders have to pay money, inject money in the company to receive these shares. 그렇죠? 이 회사에 자본을 투입을 해야 이 지분율을 유지를 할 수 있는 거죠. 그래서 이 지분율을 유지하면, so if they maintain this right, their ownership right is still 50%, 50%. 그쵸? 50%, 50% 유지를 할 수 있는데 A might not have that much of money to invest. 자본을 투입할 여력이 없을 수가 있어요. A가. 그쵸? So then, if A gives up his preemptive right, then this could be issued to the third party. A가 나는 그 돈이 없으니까 나는 참여하지 않을래. 그럴 때 제3자한테 이 돈을 나눠줄 수가 있어요. So now we have A, B, and C. Okay, so 우선은 in the first stage, because we have to protect the ownership right of the existing shareholders. That's called preemptive right. 권리는 있어요. 기존의 신주를 발행을 해도 기존의 지분율을 가지고 갈 수 있는 권리는 있어요. Even if we're issuing new shares, the existing shareholders have the right to maintain their ownership. 왜 그렇겠어요? 이게 없으면, if you don't have this, 이게 없으면, if a company has a bad manager, 경영진이 되게 나쁜 사람이라면은 잠자는 사이에 주식을 마구 발행을 할 수 있어요. They could issue more shares while AB is sleeping. And then the next day we find out that, okay, AB는 50개밖에 없는데 갑자기 C라는 사람이 300개를 가지고 가요. All of a sudden, C becomes a major shareholder of the company, right? 이런 걸 방지해야 되는 거잖아요. So we have to prevent this. So the existing shareholders have the right to maintain their ownership percentage when companies issue new shares. 근데 이거는 권리예요. 그러면은 신주를 발행할 때 반드시 참여해야 되냐? 의무냐? 아니에요. It's not their obligation to participate in this new share issuance. They can give up. 포기할 수 있어요. 그럴 때 다른 사람한테 이거를 주는 겁니다. 오케이? 됐어요? 질문. 한결이 괜찮아요? 질문. 괜찮습니까? 다 괜찮아요? Are you okay? So, 권리이기는 하지만 의무는 아니에요. So it's a right, but it's not an obligation to participate. Okay? Okay. In Korea, this right is protected by law. 근데 외국에서는 꼭 이렇지 않아요. 미국 같은 데서는 preemptive rights을 이제 허락하지 않는데도 꽤 많이 있어요. So in U.S., preemptive right is not a necessity anymore. There are many cases where companies don't have preemptive right. Don't give preemptive rights to shareholders. Okay? 옛날 이야기예요. Okay, so now keep the same percentage ownership when new shares are issued. We call this preemptive right. So before the company had 14, this person had 14% of shares. Now after the new share issued, they can still maintain that 14% of ownership. Now share an asset upon liquidation in proportion to their holdings. No, now the shareholders have the right to share an asset upon liquidation in proportion to their holdings. So when companies go through liquidation based on their ownership 지분율에 따라서 남은 거를 가지고 갈 수 있는, 나눠 가질 수 있는 권리를 가지는 거죠. 우리 100만 원밖에 안 나왔어. 내가 근데 100만 원에 50% 지분을 가지니까 50%는 내 거야. So because I'm a 50% ownership, whatever is remaining, I have 50% of ownership. They can raise that issue. Okay, they can raise that right. They can claim that right. 그 권리에 대해서 얘기할 수 있어요. That's the share, a residual claim against the existing share. Okay. So shareholders have these type of rights. 이런 정도 있습니다. So 실제 주식을 한번 보도록 할게요. So now let's look at an actual share. This is what a share looks like. This is a old version of Samsung Electronics share. 삼성전자의 과거 주식이에요. This is the old version of Samsung Electronics. First, you have the name of the company. 삼성전자 주식회사 증권이라고 주권이라고 써있죠. 주권이라고 쓰여져 있죠. 얼마냐? 금 5,000원권. 5,000원 5,000원짜리라는 거예요. So it says it's a 5,000 worth. So what does that mean? 그 뜻이 뭐예요? What does it mean? Par value. 이걸 5,000원을 우리가 5,000원짜리래요. 이거를 we call this par value라고 그래요. 액면가라고 얘기를 해요. Par value. This is called par value. 액면가. What does this mean? 이 종이 증서 하나가 5,000원짜리 증서라는 거예요. So this sheet of paper is 5,000. It says 5,000. It's like 부루마블 보시면 when you look at Monopoly 게임을 보시면 10만 원짜리 종이, 1,000원짜리 종이 이렇게 쭉 있잖아요. 그러면은 10만 원짜리 의미가 있어요. 근데 이 종이가 10만 원이라 쓰여져 있으니까 그 종이가 10만 원인 거잖아요. 여기도 5,000원이라고 쓰여져 있는 거예요. 그럼 이게 어떤 의미가 있냐? What does this mean? So because it says it's $5,000, 5,000 won here, what does this mean? Let's say A company has a par value of 5,000 and B company has a par value of, I don't know, 1,000원. 1,000원이 있다고 그래 봅시다. Let's say a company is raising, 현금이 필요한데 얼마가 필요하냐? 자본을 조달하는데 they are raising how much? Let's say they're raising 10,000원. Okay, so then how many shares do you think company will issue if the par value is 5,000원? 5,000원짜리 증서가 있으면 증서를 몇 개 이슈를 해야 될까? 발행을 해야 될까요? 10,000원을 조달하기 위해서는 5,000원짜리 증서 2개. 그쵸? 2. two sheets. 1,000원짜리는 for a $1,000 par value to raise 10,000. How many shares do you have to issue? 10. 그쵸? 10장. 그 차일 뿐이에요. So that's not much of a difference. 똑같은 거잖아요. 똑같은 만원 똑같은데 더 많이 issue하느냐, 조금 덜 issue하느냐 차이예요. So if you have a higher par value, companies issue less shares. If you have a lower par value, companies issue more shares. 맞아요? If company has a lower par value, they will issue more shares. If a company has a higher par value, they will issue less shares. 그쵸? 그 차이예요. Okay. 그러면 또 질문. If a company has more shares available, is that good or bad? 회사가 유통 주식 수가 많아요. 주식을 더 많이 유통시켰어요. 좋을까요? 나쁠까요? 좋을 수도 있고 나쁠 수도 있어요. If a company has less or very minimum number of shares outstanding, it could be good or it could be bad. 뭐가 나쁘고 뭐가 좋냐 그러면은 유통 주식 수가 낮아요. If we have a lower number of shares, if many people wants to own this, 이 종이를 많은 사람이 가지고자 하면은 이 가격이 어떻게 되겠어요? 쭉쭉쭉쭉쭉쭉쭉 올라가겠죠? 옛날 삼성전자 같은 거예요. It's like the old Samsung Electronics. Everybody wanted to own Samsung Electronics, but because they had lower number of shares outstanding, okay, because so the price of Samsung Electronics hiked. 그래서 주당 250만 원까지 갔었던가요, 그때? Okay, now 18년쯤이 됐을 거예요. 18년에 삼성 Electronics 이거를 주당 5,000원짜리 증서를 주당 1,000원으로 바꿨어요. 그러면은 if I invested 10,000원 in the old share, I would have had two shares. 두 주밖에 없었겠죠? 근데 액면 분할을 했어요. 액면 분할을 했는데 company split its stock. 오케이? 5,000원짜리를 1,000원으로 바꿨어요. 그러면은 제가 이제 몇 개가 가지고 있어요. So now how many shares do I have? 10 shares. So there were many shares. 그럼 이 하나의 가치를 하기 위해서 더 많이 있으니까 이 가치가 어떻게 됐어요? 떨어지겠죠? So we had a lower share price. 그래서 지금 6만 원, 7만 원 이거를 enjoy할 수 있는 거예요. If the share price is way too high, 주당 250만 원이면은 not many people can afford to own Samsung Electronics, right? But now because company went through a stock split, 액면가를 분할을 했어요. 5,000원짜리 이제 1,000원으로 다 바꿔줬어요. 이제 5,000원짜리는 없어요. 100원으로 바꿨죠. 100원으로 바꿨죠. 다 바꿨어요? 그러면은 이거 유통 주식수가 많으니까 많은 사람들이 이제 가질 수 있으니까 가격이 떨어지는 거예요. 오케이? 오케이. 그럼 한국은 그랬고 넷플릭스를 한번 봅시다. Netflix. Let's look at Netflix. Okay, Netflix also. This is how what their shares also look like. 넷플릭스의 주식은 이렇게 생겼어요. Netflix 회사 이름이 있고 it's a common stock 보통 주고 이름이 쭉 나와 있고 그리고 여기 보시면 여기가 제일 중요한데 fully paid and non-accessible shares of the common stock 0.001 par value. So Netflix's par value는 how much is Netflix's par value? It's $0.001. Okay, so it's a very low price. 굉장히 가격이 낮죠. 0.1센트예요. 1센트도 안 되는 숫자예요. 0.1센트. So that means the value of this par value, the share is very low. So do you think they issued a lot of share or small amount of share? 주식을 많이 발행을 했겠죠. Okay. 그러면은 I want to show you how this is shown in our financials. 우리 거기 어떻게 보여지는지 한번 보여드리고 싶어요. 이거는 this is an example of Home Depot예요. Home Depot. Do you know what Home Depot does? Home Depot라는 미국 회사인데 this is a home improvement company. So 미국은 집이 많으니까 집을 공사를 많이 해야 돼요. 그래서 여기서 파는 거는 paint. They sell nails. They sell hammer. They sell wood. They sell grass. They sell tree 이런 거 집을 개선하는데 이런 거 파는 데요. So Home Depot, look at their consolidated balance sheet. If you look at the liability section and the 여기 equity section, this is the equity section. 한번 봅시다. Common stock, blah 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 써 있어요. This is share capital ordinary section이에요. This is a share capital ordinary section, and we have paid in capital. This is share premium section. 그 갭에서는 좀 다르게 불러요. Share premium section이고 retained earning, and we have AOCI, accumulated other comprehensive loss. 이거는 뭘까요? 본 것 같아요? Have you seen this before? 본 어디서? 전 단원에서 뭐였어? What was this? 체인지의 종류? OCI, accumulated other comprehensive income 이죠. 여기 그거예요. All the accumulation of all the net income은 어디에서 기록이 돼요? Retained earning, accumulation of all the OCI is recorded, AOCI예요. And you have a treasury stock, 거기 있습니다. 여기 한번 보세요. Common stock, it says par value of 0.05. So even for Home Depot, the common stock is only 5 cents. 미국의 경우에는 par value가 굉장히 낮습니다. In the US, the par value is generally a very low number. And we have authorized information, we have issued information. 이런 정보들이 있어요. 뭔지 나중에 얘기할 거예요. So, 미국의 경우에는 in the US case, par value is probably or generally a very low number. In Korea, 한국에서는 par value는 보통 5,000, 5,000원, 2,500원, 1,000원, 500원, 100원 이렇게 있어요. 한국에서의 액면가는 보통 이렇게 지정이 되어 있습니다. Okay. Let's look at Samsung Electronics' financial statement. So in the equity section, we have preferred share, share capital preferred. 이게 그 부분이에요. Share capital preferred. We have ordinary shares, share capital ordinary section. And we have the share premium. 이거는 preferred ordinary 합한 거예요. And then we have the retained earning. And we have the other components of equity, which is generally treasury share. And we have the AOCI, accumulated other comprehensive income section. So basically, equity section will be consisted of these elements. 이러한 요소들로 자본 항목이 구성이 됩니다. Okay, now. So 여기에 봤더니 now, so we've looked at Home Depot's case, and we know what a par value is. But authorized는 뭐고 issued는 뭘까요? 한번 얘기를 해볼게요. So then what exactly is an authorized and what exactly is an issued? 한번 얘기해 볼게요. Okay. Authorized is theoretical, not theoretical, the maximum number of share a company can issue. Okay, issued share is actual number of shares company issued. Okay, so authorized share is in the corporate of incorporation or article, or what is it called? 정관의 회사가 최대한으로 발행할 수 있는 숫자가 몇 개냐라고 명시한 게 authorized shares이에요. So this is the maximum number of shares a company can issue. So by law, by companies or corporated of or article of incorporation, they have limited the maximum number of shares a company can issue. Okay. 정관에서 회사가 최대한으로 주식을 발행했을 때 몇 주까지 발행할 수 있는지를 제한을 했어요. Because they don't want management to issue shares unlimitedly. 무제한으로 주식을 발행을 하는 걸 원치 않잖아요. Because that's going to dilute the ownership. 지분율을 희석시킬 수 있으니까. So they have limited. 저희까지 가는 회사는 거의 없어요. Not many companies. I haven't seen any so far. 여기까지 이 숫자까지 주식을 발행하는 회사는 거의 없어요. 리밋을 두고 이거는 실질적으로 회사가 발행한 주식수네. 발행 주식수라고 표현을 해요. So this is the actual number of shares that a company has issued. So this is a actual. This is probably a theoretical or hypothetical. This is actual number of shares a company issued. So if you look at Home Depot, so the authorized share is 10,000. 만 개, 여기서는 1,000만 개겠죠, 사실은. Actual number authorized share is 만 개, 10,000 shares, but the company's only actually issued 1,780 shares at January 28, 2018, and 1,776 shares at January 29, 2017. So what is the total number of shares that the company have issued so far? 1780 더하기 1776. Okay, 1780 plus 1776. This is the actual number of shares that a company has actually issued. Okay, different date, 날짜는 달랐지만 that's the number of shares. Okay. So if you look at the common stock information, it's going to show you the information about the par value. It's going to show you the information about the authorized shares. And it's going to show you the information about the issued shares. 오케이, 세 가지를 다 보여줍니다. 일반적으로. 우리나라의 기업은 뒤에 주석상에 가서 보면 돼요. For Korean companies, they don't have anything listed in relation to the par value, authorized shares, or issued shares. But you can see this at the notes section. 뒤로 가서 보시면 됩니다. Okay. So authorized shares, charter indicates the amount of shares that a corporation is authorized to sell. Number of authorized share is often reported in the equity section. Issuance of share. Corporation can issue ordinary shares directly to investors or indirectly through investment banking firm. 여기 IB라고 얘기하는 거죠. Investment banking. IB 들어보셨나요? 관심이 많이 있으시죠? 예. Investment banking. They're like 부동산 회사 같은 거예요. They're like 부동산 회사, but they're like a what is it called? A medium that helps people issue shares, helps people buy other company, helps people issue debt. So 뭔가 주식에 관한 거, 회사의 전반의 의사결정, 재무에 관한 의사결정 도와주는 기관이 investment banker예요. Okay. Now, factors in setting price for a new issue of shares. So when companies issue shares, 가격을 결정하게 됩니다. So when companies issue shares, they decide a price to the share. 무슨 이야기냐 하면 얼마 전에 카카오가 주식을 발행을 했죠. 카카오 라스트 작년이었나요? They've issued shares, right? 제가 정확한 기억이 안 나는데 they probably issued their shares at 5,000원. 이거 액분했죠. 그 다음에 5,000원에 해봅시다. So 카카오, they've issued shares with a par value of 5,000원. 얼마를 이슈를 했었어요? Let's say they've issued, I don't know, 기억이 안 나는데 $1 million worth of shares. 오케이. 그런데 우리가 so people 어떻게 했어요? 카카오 주식이 신주 발행을 한데 그럼 우리도 한번 돈 넣어서 한번 사보자. 그렇게 많이 했죠. 그래서 카카오 주식을 많이 샀어요. 그랬더니 빵 마지막에 카카오 주식이 5,000원짜리가 5,000원이 아니라 가격이 4만 얼마였나요? 그때 생각이 왜 이렇게 하나도 안 나지? 4만 얼마 해서 나왔습니다. Okay. So for this sheet of share certificate, which is 5,000원, people, if many people want to own this, 이거를 많이 소유하고자 하면은 the price of this is going to go up. 겠죠? 그렇죠? 여러분 똑같잖아요. 제가 뭔가 피규어가 있어요. 이런 피규어가 있어요. 레어템이에요. 근데 이게 좋아요. 많이 있지도 않아요. 레어템이니까. 근데 이거 가지고 있으면 계속 가격이 올라갈 것 같아요. 그러면 비딩을 계속 하겠죠. We're going to bid for this rare tem, right? So then this pricing of this figure is going to go up, 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 right? Same thing. When we have a company, if a company is issuing shares, if we like this company, if many people like this company cannot issue unlimited number of shares. 주식을 마구잡이로 무한대로 발행할 수 있는 거 아니죠. They have limited number of shares. So if many people wants to own this share, then people are going to bid at a higher price to own this share, right? 그렇죠? 그러면 회사가 왜 이 주식을 사고 싶겠어요? Why would a company want to own this company share? For these reasons. Companies anticipating a good future earnings. 회사가 지속적으로 성장할 것 같아요. Expected dividend rate per share is high. If you expect the company is going to pay out a lot of dividend. If the current financial position is really, really good, and the current state of economy is good, and you have the current state of security is good, then people will bid higher for this price, right? Stock price. 그런 요소들에 대해서 얘기를 하는 거예요. So these are the elements that people would consider for pricing when companies issue new shares. The biggest reason would probably be 1번이겠죠. 1번 아니면 2번. Number 1 or number 2 with the most important reasons. However, there are other reasons why a price of a certain stock price will go up, 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 up. Okay. Now, we call this a market price. 이거를 우리가 market price라고 얘기를 하죠. 시가라고 얘기를 하죠. This one, 이건 액면가라고 얘기를 하고. So when we talk about a price of a company share, 회사의 어떤 주식의 가격을 얘기를 할 때 두 가지가 있어요. 액면가, 가격, 시가 두 개가 있어요. Generally, we don't really talk about 액면가. 액면가는 그렇게 크게 중요하지 않아요. If you think about it, par value is not as important. 근데 어른들은 이런 얘기해요. 100원짜리 주식을 지금 3,000원에 판다. 의미 없어요. 주식을 하는 사람들 그런 거 많이 들어봤어요, 동호? 못 들어봤어요. 그래서 그런 얘기를 하시는 분들도 있어요. 막, 이건 100원짜리 주식인데 지금 3,000원에 파니까 싸 의미 없어요. So par value doesn't really mean anything. This is more for accounting purpose. 회계적으로 필요한 거예요. Or tax purpose, but it doesn't really mean much. 이게 중요한 거예요. Market price is the important thing. So when we talk about a price of a stock, it's generally the market price. Okay. Now, market price of shares of publicly held companies is traded on organized exchange. Now, publicly held company. 이거 다 지난번에 설명을 했는데 let me explain once again. Public companies, listed companies, 똑같은 얘기고 상장사, 공개기업 같은 얘기고 private companies, unlisted companies, 비상장사, 비공개기업. They're all the same terminology. Okay, we've talked about this. We've discussed this before. Now, what exactly is a public company? Private company is companies that are not listed on a stock exchange, okay, which is not publicly traded, okay? So public companies, that means they are listed somewhere and they're publicly traded. So for a stock market to be traded, stock to be traded, the official place where stock is traded is called the stock exchange. 거래소라는 곳에서 stock exchange is the official place where stock is traded. 요즘에는 이게 많이 없어졌죠. OTC도 되게 많고, 그 거래소 말고 외부에서도 거래가 많이 되고, 여러분 세대에서는 이게 조금 많이 달라졌어요. 그렇죠? 하지만 옛날 기준을 보면은 stock exchange is a place where stock is actually traded. So it's a market where stock is traded, right? 이걸 거래소라고 해요. 근데 이 거래소에 to become a member of the stock exchange, you need to meet certain criteria. 몇 가지 조건들이 있어요. One of them is, okay, if you want to become a member of the stock exchange, you need to have your stocks traded here. 여기에서 주식이 거래가 돼야 우리의 멤버가 될 수 있어요. 라고 할 수 있어요. So you have to become a member of the stock exchange to be able to trade your stock. Okay? So 그렇기 때문에 이런 회사를 공개한다고 얘기를 해요. So now officially, because you're a member of the stock exchange, you can trade your stocks here. Okay, 그래서 공개 기업이라고 해요. 그래서 listed company라고 해요. Listing yourself as a member. 그 여기에 멤버로 이름을 올리는 거니까 그래서 listed company라고 얘기를 하는 거예요. Then why would companies want to be listed? 왜 listing 하고 싶을까요? 왜? What's the benefit? Raise capital easily. 많은 사람들한테 주식을 팔 수 있으니까. If you're a private company, 내가 개인적으로 나가서 투자자를 찾으면 엄마, 아빠, 동생, 몇 명, I can't find many people. But if I am a member of a stock exchange, I could go up to anybody can purchase my stock. So that means I can raise more capital. 많은 사람들이 내 주식을 알릴 수 있으니까 내 주식을 살 수 있겠죠? 그러니까 돈을 많이 벌 수 있는 거예요. Because I can tell people about my stock to the mass. So because mass will be interested in it, so I can raise a lot more capital. So you want to become a member of the stock exchange. But that's not the only reason. 그것뿐만 아니에요. 우리 멤버 되려면 뭘 해야 돼? 조건을 맞춰야 돼. So to become a stock member, you need to meet certain criteria. Criteria meaning you have to be over a certain size. You have to generate profit for 3 years. 3년 동안 이익을 내야 되고 부채 비율이 얼마 이상이 되면 안 되고. So there are certain criteria you have to meet to become a member of this exchange. Now, if you are a member of this exchange, what's good? You can tell people that you're 여기 포함이 되는 거. 나 여기 멤버야. 그럼 사람들이 날 잘 몰라도 even if people don't know you, they'll probably think 거기 멤버야? 너 좀 괜찮네? 라고 생각하겠죠. So you could do a better business, especially overseas. In an overseas market, you could do much more business. So to become a member of this is quite important for many companies, and not only raising capital, but doing business. Okay? So 그러면 거래소에 주식은 한계가 있냐? No, there are many 거래소가 되게 많아요. 거래소 종류 하나, Kospi. 또 다른 거래소, Kosdaq. It's a different class. And this is different market. 서로 다른 시장이에요. So if you're a member of Kospi, you can't be a member of Kosdaq. 이거 겸용할 수는 별로 없어요. Okay, so Kospi, Kosdaq is two different markets. 시장이 아예 다른 거예요. Kospi, Kosdaq. So generally, Kospi has more stricter criteria. 좀 더 들어가기가 힘들어요. So generally, larger size companies or more stable business 이런 회사들이 많이 들어가고. Kosdaq, more new business, less profitable company. Tech companies are part of Kosdaq. Okay? 그런 거예요. NYSE, NASDAQ도 똑같은 stock market이에요. But they're all just different NASDAQ. They're all different. Okay? Okay. Now, so market price of shares of publicly held companies traded on organized exchange. So if you are traded on an organized exchange, 여기에서 거래가 되면, if you are traded here, trading이 뭐예요? 무슨 얘기야? 거래가 된다는 거는 there's a buyer and there's a seller, right? Seller and a buyer. Seller, buyer가 있으면 there has to be a point where they meet on prices. So there's going to be a price. That's called market price. 셀러와 바이어, 공급자와 수요자가 만나서 가격을 결정하죠. Price tend to follow the trend of a company's earnings and dividends. If a company has good earnings and they pay out good dividend, then do you think more people will want to buy this stock? Yes. So if more people want to buy the stock, more buyer, then do you think the stock price is going to go up? Yes, right? So price tends to follow the trend of a company's earnings and dividend. If company has bad earnings, does not pay out dividend, Do you think people will want to be buy or become a shareholder of this company? Probably not. 그렇죠? 그래서 안 좋아하기 때문에 가격이 똑똑똑똑 떨어집니다. However, market price is not only decided between the buyer and the seller and the company's earnings and dividends. There could be other factor that influences the market price, something like the war, something like Corona, COVID, something like price or market crisis, capital crisis, or the financial crisis, IMF, things like that could also impact the market price. Okay. Now, 한번 더 얘기를 해볼게요. So generally, company has par value. Meaning when they issue share, there's going to be a value designated to the share. 이 증서에 가격이 매겨져 있어요, 일반적으로. 그렇지만 nowadays, 요즘에는 no par value도 있어요. 무액면가도 있어요. Meaning companies issue share, 삼성전자라고 share를 쓰지만 par value를 명시하지 않아요. There is no par value. 증서만 있는 경우도 많아요. So currently, par value was a value designated to this certificate. 이 증서에 가격이 매겨진 거였잖아요. 근데 이제는 no par value 해서 이 증서에 가격이 매겨지지 않는 경우도 있습니다. Okay. 한국에서는 최근에 들어서 있어요. In Korea, this policy is recently adopted. 그래서 한국에서 무액면가는 제가 한 2개 정도 봤나요? 많이 보진 않았어요. However, in the US, this is very, very, very popular. 미국에서는 무액면가, no par value companies are very prevalent. Okay? Okay. 지금까지 질문. Okay. 오늘 여기까지 수업을 하도록 할게요. I will stop here. I will continue with our what is it called? Lecture from this. 여기서부터 다음 시간 lecture를 진행을 하도록 할게요. Okay. 네. 여러분들 목요일 날 수업 없고 유튜브 보시면 되고 즐겁게 보내시고 다음 주 화요일에 뵙겠습니다. Have fun, everybody. I'll see you on next Tuesday.
Recording stopped.